All right, if all board members would you please take your seats? All right, we have about 1 hour to do business on Scup, Seabass, and Fluke, so that'll present quite a challenge for us, potentially. But then again, maybe not. The agenda may go faster than what we think, at least with what I think. So I call the meeting to order. You have an agenda before you. Under other business, I have two things I would like to add. However, they won't take that much time. There are agenda items under other business that came about after a discussion with Adam relative to two issues that are of concern to him, and I think they're of concern to the board as well. If I could have discussion around the board, Richie, please, if you would. Adam's got two issues that he wants to raise, so we'll have those under other business. One relates to technical committee work relative to sex-specific assessment models for stock assessment for Fluke. And there is another item that relates to the framework action that the Mid-Atlantic Council intends to take at its meeting next week, and all board members will be there, so we'll have an opportunity to address those issues at that time. But he at least wants to raise it under other business for all board members' consideration. So we'll do that. We'll put those two items under other business. Anything else to add to the agenda? If there are no additions, I will conclude that we have an agenda that we'll adopt by consent. All right, I see no indication that anything else needs to be added to the agenda. Therefore, the agenda is adopted as written with those two additions that I just mentioned. Proceedings from February 2014. I assume everyone has had a chance to look at those proceedings and to determine if they are correct. Does anyone object to the proceedings? Anyone have a suggestion for a change to those proceedings? I see no interest in suggesting or making a change. Therefore, we will consider the proceedings to be approved. Public comment. Always an opportunity for public comment for items not on our agenda. Does anyone in the audience care to come to the mic and address an issue that is not on the agenda? I see no interest from the public. Therefore, we'll go on to number 4, that is. Review of the public information document for draft amendment 21 for public comment. Obviously, we've jumped ahead quite a few amendments unknowingly from a low number to 21. Kirby will address that. This is the public information document that parallels very closely the scoping document that has been prepared by the Mid-Atlantic Council. The Mid-Atlantic Council, as I said, will be meeting next week. They have not yet approved that scoping document, and this is the Commission's first look-see at the plan, at the public information document prepared by staff. So Kirby will walk us through that public information document. Before he does so, however, I'll just point out that in a June memo that I drafted and sent to all board members, I indicated that it would be very useful for all board members to take a close look at the council's scoping document. And in that way, you would be better prepared for today's meeting and for discussion on our PID. I assume you've had a chance to do that, and we welcome any comments you may have regarding the PID. With that said, I'll turn to Kirby and have him review what is in that document.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just first item would be on the first page. It says it's Amendment 21. The Mid-Atlantic Council has moved to call the amendment the Comprehensive Summer Flounder Amendment, and in turn, it might not remain as Amendment 21 to us. It might be subject to change, so just be aware of that. So in December of 2013, the Mid-Atlantic Council approved a motion to develop a draft amendment to the Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Fishery Management Plan the council staff developed a draft scoping document with the following objectives: to perform a comprehensive review of all aspects of the summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass fishery management plan relative to summer flounder, to update the FMP goals and objectives for summer flounder management, and to modify the management strategies and measures as necessary to achieve those goals and objectives. Today I want to emphasize that this is, again, a draft public information document, one that if you have edits that you are hoping to get incorporated into this, to please get those edits to me as soon as possible, as we will need to then turn around the document on a very short timetable. On that note, the timeline given the board and council approving these concurrent documents, the scoping document on their end and the public information document on the board's end, if that were to take place next week, the timetable from when that starts through to the end of the amendment being approved for management use is approximately spring of 2017, which is a little less than 3 years from now. In turn, there will be a number of public hearings that would be going out and having the public provide comments on this document, as well as working groups that would identify specific issues to be included in the document as well. So what I intend to do now is go through the 5 issue items that the public information document currently lists. These were pulled from the scoping document that the council staff had drafted up in the June meeting. And if you have any specific questions on them, I ask that you hold those to the end. But I'll go through each of them relative to their statement of the problem generally, and some of the management questions we're hoping to put forth to get specific comments from the public back on. So the first item is the FMP goals and objectives. Amendment 2, which was passed in approved in 1993, contained the first shared objectives between the board and the council's FMP on summer flounder. Those 6 goals were the first to reduce fishing mortality in the summer flounder fishery to assure that overfishing does not occur, reduce fishing mortality on immature summer flounder to increase spawning stock biomass, to improve the yield from the fishery, to promote compatible management regulations between the state and federal jurisdictions, to promote uniform and effective enforcement of the regulations, and to minimize regulations to achieve the management objectives as stated. The statement of the problem for this is simply that over the last 20 years, there's been many changes to the FMP through amendments, framework adjustments, and addendums, while the management objectives have remained the same. In addition, during this period, the status of the stock has changed, with the stock being determined rebuilt in 2011. The question then is posed, do the management objectives still capture the needs and goals of the FMP? One thing also I'll highlight in going through these 5 are not listed in any particular order of importance per se, so don't view it as a ranking of them. It's simply just the listing of what we were, the way in which we pulled it from the list in the scoping document. Issue 2, quota allocation between the commercial and recreational fisheries. That amendment to in 1993 also determined a 60-40 split between the commercial and recreational fisheries, which was based on the historical landings. Again, the characteristics have changed in the fishery over the last 20 years. So the questions to the public are, is the existing allocation between the commercial and recreational sectors based on the total allowable landings appropriate for managing the summer flounder fishery? And if not, how should those allocations be revised? The third issue is commercial management measures and strategies. Here I've just listed out some of the items that could be seen as underneath or part of that broader topic. They include commercial fishing gear requirements, minimum fish size requirements, possession limits and trigger requirements, time and area closures and exemption programming, licensing, commercial quota allocation strategies, and the landing flexibilities, whether on a regional, coastwide, or other basis. Again, these are things that we are hoping to get feedback from the public on regarding the management of summer flounder for the commercial fishery. The fourth is regarding recreational management measures and strategies. As a state-by-state conservation equivalency that was used up until recently, it was based on the 1998 estimated state harvests. As we outlined in amendment or addendum 25 earlier this year, this was viewed as not a long-term solution. And as that 98 based allocation formula doesn't account for changes in the socioeconomic patterns across the coast during the last 15 years, specifically with regards to the number and distribution of anglers along the coast, the questions put forth are whether that is an appropriate way to continue to manage that fishery. The fifth issue is with regards to discards in the commercial and recreational fisheries. Over the last 30 years, discards in both sectors have persisted. On the recreational side, they've increased from 30% of the total recreational catch in 1981 to approximately 84% of the catch in 2013. On the commercial side, commercial discards have constituted 8% of the total catch since 1982, with commercial discard losses in the otter trawl and scallop dredge fisheries accounting for approximately 14% of the total commercial catch during this period. Lastly, we have included under other issues two items, first pertaining to ecosystem, habitat, bycatch, and protected species issues. Are these items that are currently addressed in the fishery management plan, do they need to be updated, and if so, how? And then the second pertaining to the data collection requirements and protocols for both the commercial and recreational sectors. Are the current requirements effective? And if not, how should they be revised as well? So with that, I'll take any questions that the board may have on this document. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kirby. This public information document and the issues that were just described by Kirby should not be new to at least one-third of the individuals around the table, since you are council members and you participated already in preparing this draft scoping document. But there are many board members who might find this document and the issues therein brand new. So with that said, are there any questions of Kirby regarding what is in the document, or perhaps what is not in the document? Okay. Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see if I can get into this quickly or easily. The document, I think, is pretty comprehensive. I mean, I've gone through it, and I think we've got most of the issues framed out in it. The one issue I see, and I'm throwing this out as more of a question of what we have to reconcile, is the schedule. When we started this last year, and the amendment was initiated in December, because of all things going back on in New York, we were trying to give an estimate, and we were saying it would probably take about 18 to 24 months to complete the amendment, and that was based upon history. The schedule now has it looking at spring of 2017, which means if we get to that point, we wouldn't have these changes or anything in terms of management implemented until 2018, which is 4 years from now, which is, again, a much longer period of time than we're thinking. If you recall back at that time, back in the fall, there was legislation being proposed, and Senator Schumer had put in the Fluke Fairness Act to try to move these things along. That has gone away, but it has now been, I guess, inserted into Magnuson in its entirety. And that, I don't think anybody believes Magnuson may be passing this year, but probably next year. And that has a requirement to have this, a new management plan completed in 1 year. So we have a difference of schedules right now, and a very significant difference even based upon when we first looked at the Fluke Fairness Act based upon our 2-year schedule. They were going to line up a little closer. Now they're pretty far apart. So we have to deal with that, because I don't know what we're going to do in Magnuson in terms of, I doubt that's going to get removed with the time frame we have now. So the simple thing is if we could expedite this, and I understand that's going to be difficult because there's a lot of issues we have to discuss, but we at least have to recognize that we sort of have parallel efforts going on here and trying to get to, newer Fluke management, and I'm not sure how we would get, how we're going to reconcile that. So it's a point just we need to be aware of at this point. Thank you.
So your question, Jim, is that how should the plan information document deal with what's going on with Magnuson?
Not really. I'm just, again, I think the schedule itself, I think maybe could be expedited somewhat, and I think we need to look at that. It would be the only action we can take, but we need to reconcile the fact that if Magnuson directs us to put a management plan together with the council in 1 year, that's going to be the schedule. That schedule is going to go out the door. So, again, I'm not sure how to resolve this, but that's a fact of life we have to deal with.
All right. Thank you, Jim. That's informative. However, questions, please. We'll have opportunity for comment shortly. Tony?
I was just going to respond to Jim in that I think that this is an appropriate topic to bring up at the joint meeting with the council, because part of the longer process of this is dependent on what issues get taken up in the document. Things like changes in allocation require significant more impacts and to be done, especially through what is required by the federal government for the council. And so depending on what you put in will also determine that length that the document is being done. But if we do need to make this timeline shorter because of what is going on with Magnuson, I think that's a discussion for both bodies to have.
Yes, I suspect that at our meeting next week, your points will be raised again, Jim, by you or somebody else, perhaps by the executive director of the Mid-Atlantic Council, and then we'll see where we go from there, because it is a very, very relevant point. If you're quite correct, every version I've seen of Magnuson reauthorization has that reference to Fluke. So, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to you, is whether today now is the appropriate time to offer suggested additions to the PID, or whether that's next week, or so that's my first question, and depending on the answer, I may have a suggested addition. Thank you. Okay.
Yes, every member of the board will have another bite at the apple, so to speak, next week. However, there may be some board members present today who will not be there next week, and you might, therefore, those board members, you might have something you feel has not been included in the PID and it needs to be included. So this is an opportunity, especially for those individuals, to weigh in, have an opportunity to contribute, and to have your issues addressed if they're not already addressed in this PID and, of course, in the scoping document. A lot of ground has been covered in both documents. I'm guessing that there's very little, if anything, that will be offered up as an addition, but I can be wrong on that. Okay, did you want to continue, Bob?
Well, I just want to note for the board's edification, I do have a suggested addition. I'd be happy to offer that now, if only as an FYI. Perhaps bring it up again next week. I see Tony noting yes now, and I'll be brief. My suggestion is that under issue 2 on page 11, which addresses quota allocation between the commercial and recreational fisheries, that as an additional management question, the following should be added. Should consideration be given to a separate for-hire allocation recreation for the summer flounder fishery. I think that would be a very useful management question to tee up early on in this process, and I think that might be the place to do it. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
All right, with no objection from the board, we'll add that to the list of questions that relates to that issue. Okay. Tom Forty.
Yeah, Jim, when they passed the 2006 Magnuson-Stevens Act, they told NIMS that they would have in place by 2009 a system to correct recreational fishing statistics. We're now sitting in 2014, we're still working on it. So, I mean, they put deadlines and they don't fund them and things like that. So there's a lot of leeway when they said 1 year from implementation. And I don't know if Magnuson-Stevens Act will be passed next year or not. It's going to look like 2 years from now.
For the benefit of the board and especially for the staff, there's something I suspect would go a long way towards improving the PID and also the scoping document, and we can get to that next week with the full council. And that's on page 5 of the PID, where it makes mention of the fact that the Commission and the Council are proposing this action to evaluate the need for management response to changing conditions in the summer flounder fishery. This includes addressing apparent shifts in the distribution and center of the biomass for summer flounder, possibly related to the effects of rebuilding and or climate change, as well as changing social and economic drivers for these fisheries. Now, that language has appeared before in different documents. I think it would be very useful for the public, certainly for us, but undoubtedly for the public to have a better understanding as to what that means. There's no information in this document under the purpose of the public information, under the purpose of the document or under background material that would provide more clarity, a bit more explanation. What exactly does that mean? I think if it can be better explained, what is being said there, the public would be in a much better position to respond with some informed comments. So that's my suggestion to the staff, if the board agrees. To the extent that we can, it would be useful to include that information, since a lot of it does reflect on the different issues and the questions that are posed relative to those issues. All right, any other suggestions for change? Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on that issue in that it may help to get sort of a composite of the information about climate variability and effects that have occurred. And I know at the Mid-Atlantic Council there was a review done by the SSC, and probably that information could be helpful as well.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, Louis.
Yeah, on page 11, at the bottom of page 11, under the statement of the problem on commercial summer flounder management measures and strategies, I'm going to make a pitch to remove commercial quota allocation strategies and landings flexibility. That's going to create a mess for this commission, probably for the council. It's, the Fluke Fairness Act, that's not going to really, some of that's not going to be really fair to everybody. It's going to create a battle between the states. If we start talking about trying to reallocate the summer flounder, you're going to end up with auditoriums of people in North Carolina and Virginia probably. And I would strongly suggest to the board and to the council that they remove those two items from the list of options.
You're suggesting, Louis, that the commercial quota allocation strategies and landings flexibility, those two should be deleted from the list, if I understood you correctly?
Yes.
Okay, with those specific requests, I guess the question the board could ask, and I'll ask as chair, if indeed we are identifying as a reason for this PID, and of course for the scoping document, the fact that there have been shifts in the distribution and center of the biomass, et cetera, with that understood as having happened, doesn't that inevitably lead the board and then the full council to deal with those specific issues you would like to have removed from the document?
No. I don't believe so, because I don't know. First, I don't know necessarily that that's the case. that there have been shifts in allocation. I believe that the larger fish are moving north, which one would expect as the stock rebuilds and the age structure expands. But in the recreational fishery, that may be appropriate. If there are no longer summer flounder in North Carolina waters, there's really not a whole lot of need to have a lot of quota allocated to North Carolina recreational fishermen. But in the case of the mobile North Carolina and Virginia, at least, and I'm not speaking for Virginia, but I'm familiar with their fishery, we move with the fish. And so there's no reason for that quota to be reallocated when it's a mobile fleet. Our guys are fishing off of your area. Our guys are fishing off of New York. And they're working it out with the other states to land in those specific areas. And in many instances, North Carolina boats, Virginia boats, whatever, are landing up and down the beach. And we've worked out a very good arrangement with Virginia and other states to land those fish in the event that we have problems in Oregon Inlet. So I think this, if the landings flexibility is intended to help the commercial fishermen avoid fuel costs and provide them with more flexibility and opportunities, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. But if the concept here is to go in and readjust the state-by-state allocations, then I strongly object to that as the state of North Carolina representative.
If I may, have you made these arguments at the Mid-Atlantic Council? You're not a member of the council, that's right. Sorry about that.
I am a member of the council, but my proxy, Chris Batsavage, is my designee on the council, and he will be making those comments as well. But I need to make sure this board is aware of these issues, and this is because this, I think, will raise some real concerns for us in the future.
All right. Well, thank you, Rob.
Was that a Rob?
Yes, it is.
Okay. 2017 may not be enough time once we start getting into these issues, and I don't mean that facetiously. I mean there's new generations, and I think when they first saw some of this information, it's really an issue of reallocation. And maybe before anyone looks at reallocation, they need to look at this climate situation. And the reason I mentioned the SSC from the Mid-Atlantic Council was because the conclusion was that it's not a biomass shift, it's a range extension. There's a big difference, and it follows more closely to what Lewis is describing. But we all want to hold on to something, and that seems to be something that we held on to for a while. I thought the fervor had died down, but more important than that, when you talk about the commercial fishery, it almost seems on page 11 that it talks about when the commercial state-by-state quotas were set between 1980 and 1999, and depending on how you look at the next set of information about since that, a series of amendments, frameworks, and addendums, it almost leads one to thinking that they're archaic, that the 1980 to 1989 allocation is archaic. So I've looked, not quite finished yet, but I've looked back to 1980 and 1989, and the areas where summer flounder were harvested commercially by Virginia vessels, and there's a great deal of overlap with Virginia and North Carolina vessels, really is somewhat similar to the current time. So we all believe that the vessels go up off New Jersey or further, and that's a modern phenomenon, and it's not. So I think we really are going to have some big discussions. I haven't heard the word community today, but I heard that a lot recently in the last 6 months, that do you value the community and the infrastructure that has been built, or do you value changes in distribution, no matter what you might call them, as being a cause for disrupting the community structure? I mean, those are the type of issues that are going to come forward, and I know it's going to be a tug of war, but really we are going to bog way down, and I agree with Lewis. If we keep the landings allocation strategies there, and really as the really the top card in a lot of people's minds that I've talked to over the last 10 months.
All right, thank you. We're not going to vote on this PID today. That's inappropriate. As I indicated, we're going to discuss this further at our meeting next week with the Mid-Atlantic Council. I suspect that the points made by Rob and by Louis will come up again. Therefore, I don't look to the board to decide that indeed these should be taken out and we should have a position against these particular descriptions of the statement of the problem. We don't have time to deal with that anyways because it's already a half an hour into our 1 hour meeting. So we'll just acknowledge the fact that we have these two very strong points of view, which will be expressed next week, and then collectively the Commission and the Board will have to deal with those points of view. Something new, Louis? Okay.
Thank you, and I'm fine with that approach, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out too what Rob, just provide a little additional information for the record on what Rob indicated. One of the main reasons that our fleet has shifted north is because of the TED requirements. We could catch the fish off North Carolina, but we can't catch them with a TED. We have to have a TED up to Cape Charles. And so if you've ever trawled with a TED, they shoot right out of the TED, especially at the size limits that we're looking at. So that's what the other confounding factor of the allocation scheme is that our guys are willing to go north to avoid the TED requirements in the southern region.
Okay, thank you for that, Louis. Does anyone else have anything to offer up now relative to the planned the PID that needs to be discussed today as opposed to next week, again, in light of the time? Jim.
Just a quick point, and I just wanted to make a statement that I think that issue 3 is probably one of the most important points in the addendum. So, I mean, we'll have this out next week, but quite frankly, I know it's going to be messy, Louis, but we got to do it someday. So here we are. So we'll see what happens next week. Thank you.
And I'm not. I'm only acknowledging hands from board members. So, sorry. All right. Any other comment on the PID? All right. However, I will recognize you because of your enthusiasm for getting an opportunity to speak. So why don't you come to the microphone?
Yeah, Arnold Leo. I represent the fishing industry of the town of East Hampton, Long Island, and I might say. I always thought that any of these discussions always included a public comment sector, and I'll keep this brief, though. Under issue 2, when you ask the question, is the existing allocation between commercial and recreational sectors appropriate for managing the summer flounder fishery? Do you know how many more recreational fishermen there are than commercial fishermen? What do you expect the answer is going to be here? I mean, this is a loaded question, the way it's phrased here, and I object to it. And the second question I have, issue 5, you mention the discards of the recreational fishery without identifying what the mortality rate of the recreational discards are. I think that should be added in because you have that information for the commercial fisheries there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, without objection, we'll go on to the next agenda item, which would be a review of the summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass advisory panels. I believe you have a memo, and a memo has been made available describing the issue, and I'll turn now to Kirby for some elaboration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we had a memo that we sent out to the board last week, and then today, at the beginning of this meeting, we also distributed a copy of it, so you should have one of those 2 copies in front of you. I'm going to go through it briefly just to outline some of the more salient points that were raised in that memo. Back in 2007, the board worked to coordinate the AP membership with the Mid-Atlantic Council's membership. Since then, the coordination hasn't been maintained, and participation among the ASMFC AP members has been dwindling. Currently, the ASMFC AP for summer flounders, scup, and black sea bass consists of 3 separate groups, whereas the council has 1 AP for all 3 species. Given the recent declaration of interest by the states of New Hampshire and Maine, those 2 states would also, a declaration of interest in the black sea bass fishery, those 2 states would also have an opportunity to have representation in the advisory panel as well. I wasn't able to pull that great table that Tina helped me craft last week onto the PowerPoint presentation, but if everyone who has a copy of it, just to look, it's important to note that we've tried to color code this table to highlight how attendance has diminished over time. Primarily, we've identified people where they have not been attending they've either attended 2 or less meetings over the last 7 years, or none at all. And for that, we think it's really it's needed to improve the attendance membership by having this reconfigured. So as outlined in the memo, the staff recommends that the board consider consolidating the advisory panels into 1 group, similar to the Mid-Atlantic Council's AP, in which the Commission's AP would supplement the Council's AP membership, and that the recommendation is to remove AP members with poor attendance, and to recommend that for those AP members that are being replaced, that you seek to replace them with people who have expertise among all 3 species. So if you have any questions, please let me know now. We're open to suggestions, but this was the staff's recommendation based on our review of the AP participation. Thanks.
Okay, the staff has done some legwork on this, and they've given us a recommendation. Does anyone object to the recommendation that we consolidate our 3 panels into 1 panel, such as similar to what the Mid-Atlantic Council has done? Is there an objection? Roy? You object?
Rob?
Rob, sorry.
Bob, Roy, it's really Rob, everyone, so take it easy, you know.
I get it eventually.
You better. All right. Not an objection as such. I just don't know how this is going to work. And Kirby, I did not see your email from last week, but I have an indication a couple of the Virginia representatives haven't been very active, and so I don't know about some of the others you haven't listed, in particular for when they've attended. So, I'm fine with the change. Just let me know, is there going to be 1 representative commercial, 1 representative recreational? But fundamentally, my understanding is the most critical meeting is when the monitoring committee and the technical committee meet, and then the advisors meet at that time. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the next instance in which we would have the AP meet, or the APs meet, would be in November, coinciding with the next monitoring committee meeting to review recreational measures for 2015.
All right, with that said, with there being no objection, is there objection to our combining the 3 into 1? That's the first question. If there is an objection, let's hear it.
Thank you.
You did not object, I don't think, Rob.
It is Rob. No, I am just seeking some guidance. I need to know what we need to do in order to accommodate this new process, because obviously we would like to send some other recommendations in for personnel that would attend these meetings. That's all I'm asking.
Okay, well, the response would be what staff has recommended, and that is take a look at the list of advisors from your state right now, take a look at the attendance of those individual members, and then use that list and that list of attendance as a way to give you guidance as to whether you should say to us, to the staff, yes, you would like those people to continue. If not, who else should be recommended to take their place or added to the list of advisors so that each individual state feels comfortable with the representation of both members of the recreational fishery as well as the commercial fishery. Tina.
It was our plan, if the board approved the consolidation to one AP, to contact all the states, let them give them a little more information on attendance and participation. It's not our hope or intent that you would simply go with the Mid-Atlantic advisors. We clearly want a fair representation, and of all the states involved, several states are not on the Mid-Atlantic Council, so we'll make sure they have adequate representation. It's hard for us to give you a number, Rob, given that you're looking at 3 different species and you have various user groups, so we are basically asking the states to consider who would be the best fit for the panel and make those nominations on their best guess or estimate of what will work best for them. And then if we find that it's too unwieldy, then we'll bring it back to the board, and you guys can talk about if it's too big or if the representation is adequate.
Okay, so Tina, representing the staff, is providing us with, I guess, a 2-step process, and I suggest that we follow her lead and wait for her and staff to distribute that information. Each state would then have an opportunity to look it over, make some suggestions, and then staff would evaluate what is provided to see if we've got a nice cross-section of user groups and representation from all the individual states. If they feel that we've got it, then good, they'll report back to us with that conclusion. If not, they'll let me know early on so I can get back to all board members and indicate that there's still a problem and we need to give this some further thought. So that's the procedure I would like to follow, and if there's no objection, that's what we'll do. Adam?
As part of that process, Mr. Chairman, could we get some input about how this AP would act in terms of it being similar to other board APs? Specifically, this AP has had a history of basically following the Mid-Atlantic process and meeting jointly with their APs. The AP historically, prior to 2 to 3 years ago, used to meet, as Rob was alluding to, immediately following the monitoring committee meeting. A couple of years ago, that process changed following the Mid-Atlantic's lead with APs to basically develop an AP fishery performance report, which would then serve to inform the SSC, which would meet thereafter, and then subsequently the monitoring committee, and ultimately give us quota recommendations or regulation recommendations on which to act. So the functioning of the AP has already changed quite a bit. I think the Mid-Atlantic has done a very good job of helping to try to formulate a more formal way for their AP to work. I think we're kind of tagging along, if you will, at this point. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think there might be a need to look at how this AP functions to be consistent with other APs as well.
Okay, Adam, that sounds like a good suggestion. Tina has heard it. I'll just assume that we'll follow through with that suggestion. Representative Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have an issue with the consolidation. I would just ask that when the communication comes, that it be directed to the commissioners. I'm looking through the list here, and I do recognize some of the names, and so I'm thinking that rather than a cold letter that came from the commission, let's say, talking about reorganization, rather than an opportunity, I think, for us to discuss what our vision might be, might not be received as well. That's all.
Okay, thank you. David?
Yeah, and I wasn't clear on number of members per state. I mean, would we be looking for one person from each state, or we have the party charter, we have recreational, we have commercial. Tina, I think, can help me with that, or Tony.
Tina.
I think, again, we didn't want to tell a state they needed 2 people if they felt that they needed 3 to represent their for-hire commercial and recreational fisheries. The thing that we were hoping is we don't get 6. Because we're trying to get people that have a knowledge base of all 3 fisheries if possible, recognizing there are differences in those fisheries. So again, I didn't want to give you guidance on you must have 2, and then people felt that they really want 3. So we're really asking the state to look at who will best fit this advisory panel. Connecticut, since you're not represented in the Mid-Atlantic Council, you certainly would, have at least 2, if not more. I can't give you any further guidance because I don't know who's going to fit best for your fisheries.
I would suggest that each state will use its judgment as to what's the best number, what's the best coverage, and then offer that up. We all need to feel comfortable with what we have as representation for the industry in our states. And so we'll go with the procedure as detailed by Tina and as described by me. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you answer the question as to the current membership and the communication with the current membership? Are we essentially doing a review and starting from scratch again? And are the folks on this list going to be informed that are they going to be informed that they're no longer pegged as an AP member and that they need to coordinate with the state and so forth, or are we going to just come out with new membership and then the communication will happen after that with the current members? Thank you.
Tina?
I will tell you that I did send a copy of the memo and the spreadsheet to the advisors to keep them informed on what is going on. We follow your lead. If you want the state to be the person to contact that person that they want to replace, that's fine. If you want the commission to be the one, that's fine as well. So in my correspondence to you all, I'll give you detailed information about current participation, how well they're doing, how many people, up to how many people you can have, as well as give you the prerogative to let me know whether you want me to correspond to the people that you're replacing or you want to handle that.
All right, thank you, Tina. That sounds like a good way to go. Bill Adler.
Yeah, Tina, and I think it should be up to the state. Tina can inform the state, the people, let the state get a hold of those people and let them decide whether they're going to stay or not, rather than all hanging on Tina over there. Thank you.
Yes, that's the procedure we'll use. All right. Let's move on from the advisory panel discussion to item 6 on the agenda, which is consider adjustment to the 2014 black sea bass recreational season for the southern states. This is an action item. I believe that we all have a handout that describes the nature of that action. Kirby will summarize what we have before us and the sorts of decisions we need to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, this is reviewing the 2014 black sea bass recreational season for the southern states, and that is the states of Delaware through North Carolina. So as background, in March of 2014, the board approved the black sea bass recreational management measures for the Delaware through North Carolina that equated to an approximate 7% reduction in the 2014 harvest relative to the 2013 harvest. That 7% reduction was based on accounting for the 2012 and 2013 overage and preliminary 2013 data. Once the 2013 data was finalized, the board sent a letter to NIMS requesting consideration of this updated data with regards to the required reduction needed. Last month, NIMS released recently published their final rule. The specifications for federal black sea bass recreational management measures resulted in approximately a 5% reduction in harvest relative to 2013 harvest. This difference is going from 7% to 5% resulted in approximately 3 additional days in September, whereas currently it's open until September for states of Delaware through North Carolina to September 19th. The federal rule was up through September 21st. Today, the board should consider adjustments to the 2014 black sea bass recreational season for the states of Delaware through to North Carolina, north of Cape Hatteras. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to the National Marine Fisheries Service for having a lesser cut than what was initially thought would be required, gifting us with 3 additional days. That's the action. Should we consider adjusting the 2014 recreational season for the states of Delaware to North Carolina? And as I understand it, the only option here relative to adjustment would be to add 3 days. Tony or Kirby, could you explain if there are any other options?
Yes, it would just be an adjustment to the season length. Just the size limit and possession limits are the same between the states and the federal final rule.
Right. Does anyone care to make a motion regarding this particular issue? Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to move that the Commission consider adopting the adjustment to the recreational black sea bass season of 2014 that would add an additional 3 days to that season.
Second from David Borden. All right, discussion on the motion. Well, is there any discussion on the motion? I do see some discussion requested. Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think, at least it's obvious to me, the question is why are we not having this discussion for the northern states? And discussion in the past had included discussion about the entire coast. So if we're talking about a recovery for the southern states, which I'm all in favor of, what do we do to gain a couple of days back for the northern region as well?
All right, I'll turn to staff on this one. Tony, or Kirby, do you have an explanation?
So if you recall on the conference call that we discussed whether or not the board wanted to approve the 5% or the 7%, the board did discuss what you could potentially do down the road, and the board had indicated, due to the uncertainty in the plans, that you wanted to stick with the 7% and that you would just stick with the measures you had approved. We would have to have the TC go back and figure out for each of the states how many additional days that potentially could give you. For each state, it would likely be different. It wouldn't just be a straight across the board, every state could get 3 days because of the harvest per day. It may be that a state could get more than 3 days. I don't have the math in front of me. But because of the uncertainty in the data that several of the states had done mode splits, the board had discussed just keeping the northern states the same, and that if the federal measures did change, that the southern states would like the opportunity to discuss changing their regs. And so that's why we only brought this forward as a southern state change. If the board would like to consider changes for the northern states, we can do that. And I guess in order to expedite it, we would have to have the TC meet via conference call, and then the board would have to make those changes via email vote. Would be the fastest way we could do that. But that was the direction that the board had given us back in May on that conference call.
All right, thank you for reminding us of the direction we've already given the staff. Appreciate that, Tony. So that should answer your question, Adam. So right now we have a motion before us, and unless someone cares to go in a different direction, we'll vote on it, but I do see some hands. So I'll go back to you, Adam, as a follow-up.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as long as there will be the opportunity to make a subsequent motion, I'll let us vote this up or down first, as opposed to amending it to include what Tony has proposed as a way forward.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Rob, to the motion?
Yes, just to clarify that it's for the states of Delaware through North Carolina.
All right, thank you for that clarification. All right, so I'd like to read the motion into the record. It is to we are refining the language. Just hold on for a moment. All right. Rob, if you'd look at the screen and tell me if that is your motion. Yes, it's Mr. O'Reilly, otherwise known as Rob.
But welcome to the
Second
family,
by Mr.
Rob.
Gordon. Lucky I get the first name, never mind the last name.
Mr. Chairman, I indicated adding 3 days, and that would be September 20th for the end of it. Yes, sir. I did mention in my motion to add the 3 days in. That would be equivalent to September 21, so that's fine.
All right, the maker of the motion is pleased with the language on the screen. Therefore, I will read it into the record. Move to adopt the adjustment for the states of Delaware to North Carolina for the recreational Black Sea Bass 2014 season. Extend the season to September 21. Motion by Mr. O'Reilly, seconded by Mr. Borden. Okay, that is the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Further discussion? I see none. Is there any objection to the motion? I see none. Therefore, the motion is adopted. Adam.
I'd like to make the motion to move that the technical committee provide options to the northern states for a change in the reduction from 7% to 5%.
All right, hold on one second. We will type that up. Do you need it repeated? Could you repeat that, Adam? Staff's having a bit of a difficult time getting it right.
Move to have the TC provide options for the northern states, Massachusetts through New Jersey, to achieve the 5% reduction instead of the current 7%. And if there's any wordsmithing suggested, I'm open to it.
All right, Adam, take a look at the language on the screen and tell us if it is correct.
That works for me.
All right, that works for Adam. Motion is made by Adam Nowalski, seconded by William Adler. Okay. And the motion is move to have the technical committee provide options for the northern states of Massachusetts to New Jersey to achieve the 5% reduction instead of the 7% reduction for the Black Sea Bass recreational fishery. Motion by Mr. Nowalski, seconded by Mr. Adler. That is the motion before us. Is there discussion on the motion? Is there any objection to the motion? Well, okay, go ahead, David.
Yeah, not so much objection, but so the last thing we just did was to be consistent with the final rule. So, okay, and it's only 3 days. What are we on, August 6th or thereabouts today? We're probably a week from getting estimates through wave 4, May, June. That'd be wave 3, I guess. So I don't know where we stand relative to hitting our objective. Playing around with a couple of percent now, we may, for lack of a better way to say it, look foolish by the end of the year, depending on how this fishery plays out. I suspect if that 2011 year class shows up this fall, we're going to catch a lot of black sea bass. And then the Mid-Atlantic Council is on a path to open up wave 1 for all those states that have offshore party boat fisheries. I don't know whose pocket that's coming out of, but somebody's going to have to pay for that. And then opening May 1. So I've got my reservations about relaxing even a little bit more now on sea bass.
Okay, thank you, David. Those are very legitimate concerns expressed by the state of Connecticut. I suspect Massachusetts would have similar concerns. 3% is a relatively small number, and the year is not yet over. All right, so we have a motion on the screen. Is there any objection to the motion? All right, I see no objection. I do see an objection. All right. David.
This will be very, very fast, Mr. Chairman. I just point out for everyone's edification is we're just asking TC to do the analysis. We're not committing to the action. So we'll vote on it later on.
Correct observation. Tony.
So my question back to the board, I guess, before we finalize this motion is, what's the time frame you want the TC to provide these options back to you, and then do you want to carry forward in the way that I described, as the board would have an email vote if they brought back options, or because if we bring back options to you in October, this doesn't really help anybody because most of your fisheries are open for the rest of the year, I believe. So during that time, because your closures are more in the fall period, right around the annual meeting. So
I'm assuming that, well, I shouldn't assume anything relative to black sea bass. It's redistributed itself, so this year should be a real surprise for everyone. Well, indeed, if this motion does pass, then we have to wait for the technical committee to provide some options, and then those options would have to be distributed to all the board members for their consideration. So what's the board's pleasure? How would you like to proceed with getting the information and then following up afterwards once you have that information in hand? Bob.
Well, gee, it would be great to get it for next week, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I would think it would have to be as soon as possible, and it would have to be via conference call, and just understanding full well that we are, late in the season. So as soon as possible means as soon as possible. I don't see what other direction we can provide other than the obvious, which is at least give us the opportunity to try to evaluate and respond to the TC options by the end of August, but as soon as possible. Thank you.
All right, I suggest that the chair and staff will discuss the different options available to move this forward as fast as possible. So we'll wait for the technical committee to review and then go according to the approach that would be best in terms of our having those TC options reviewed, and then states will be able to move forward if they choose to do so. Because after all, it is August. By the time the technical committee looks at this, it might be the middle of August, if not the latter part of August. The weeks are ticking away. States have administrative procedures to follow in order to make changes. So to make a change for 3 days or so, again, it's going to be up to each individual state to determine whether it's worth the effort to go through all the administrative changes. It's unfortunate that it's taken this long to get this decision from the service relative to this change for the additional 3 days, but that's the way it is. So let's wait for the TC review, see what that reveals, and go from there. And as I said, in the meantime, staff and I will work out a procedure that we feel makes sense, and we will make that procedure known to all board members way ahead of time so no one's caught off guard. Okay, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification on my part, the options provided from the TC, will they just be related to extra days, or will there also be suites for bag limit increases and sizes and all that, or just days?
Tony?
It's the board's prerogative. I would think that the number of days would probably be the fastest for them to do their analysis. It's more complicated to do the bag limit analysis and size changes. So we look to your direction.
I'm assuming that it will be days and nothing else. It seems hard to believe that anyone is going to be able to suggest a change in the minimum size or anything else that would result in the additional catch that would equate to 3 days. I could be wrong. The technical committee can look at it, but I would be very surprised. Now, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason why Rick asked the question is we're open through the rest of the year, so our adjustments the only way we could benefit from this would be a bag limit adjustment as I see it, so thank you.
Well, we'll ask the technical committee to look at that as well, see if they can. That's the best we can do relative to a request of the technical committee to help us out with this interesting situation. All right, well, if there is no objection to this motion, we will consider it to be approved. There's no objection, therefore the motion is adopted. And we'll now pass that on through Tony and Kirby to the TC for its evaluation. Number 7 on the list is discussion of the research set-aside program for summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass. I put this on the agenda. At first, I thought it was a good idea, and after thinking about it, it's not such a good idea. I had assumed that it might be good to consider this as something to put in the PID, but it dawned on me that this particular issue has to be dealt with very, very soon. If not yesterday, then certainly tomorrow, and the Mid-Atlantic Council will be addressing this again, dealing with the research set-aside. I think the day before the board meets, I had thought maybe it would be useful to have the board comment on the research set-aside, the auction and the like, but we have no time for that. So I suggest that board members, if you care to further comment on the research set-aside, suggested changes to the research set-aside, you can participate, be present at the Mid-Atlantic Council discussion on this issue, which I believe is next Tuesday, something like that. I think it's next Tuesday. That's the best we can do in light of the time available to us now. Mike?
Yeah, to your point, I just wanted to, I'll speak to this point and then also to what was brought up under other business, which I think is next on the agenda. But the council convenes next Tuesday. The morning session of the council will be talking about the framework that deals with sea bass and the Wave 1 opening and adjustments to the early portion of the federal season. Research set-asides after lunch, and then the council gets together with the commission in a joint fashion to discuss bluefish specifications. Now, given I spoke with Adam yesterday, and given the concern about the commission's involvement in the discussion with the black sea bass framework, I reached out to Rick Robbins today, the chairman of the council, and he suggested that for any commissioners who are interested in participating in that discussion, even though we won't be meeting jointly as a demersal committee and a black sea bass summer flounder scup board, he's offered that any commissioners that will be present that day that want to engage in those discussions with the council, he's inviting everybody to participate during that early portion of the day, outside of the joint meeting that we have scheduled for later that day. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. In a very efficient way, you've addressed that other business item. We appreciate the effort to reach out to Rick Robbins to get that offer. Much appreciated. So with that said, we don't need to deal with that other business item. Adam, I feel it's been adequately covered. Do you agree? I see your head shaking up and down. So we'll go on to the last business on other business. So Adam, if you would introduce the issue as briefly as you can.
Sure, great. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mike, for following up on our conversation yesterday as well. The last summer flounder stock assessment under peer review brought forth the suggestion that one of the ways forward would be to develop a sex-specific model. A number of different groups, primarily previously recreationally funded, had been involved with an effort to bring additional resources to the 2011 stock assessment, which helped lead to a significant change in the SSB target at that time, bringing it down from over 200 million pounds to approximately 132 million pounds, resulted in the stock status being declared rebuilt and providing for some of the liberalizations that we've enjoyed in recent years on summer flounder. Following up on that, on this issue of a sex-based model, a number of those groups with some additional groups, both recreational and commercial, are now working with Pat Sullivan from Cornell on developing that sex-based model. One of the greatest concerns in the development of that model is going to be the data sources for doing so. Over the last 4 to 5 months, I've had numerous conversations with both Mid-Atlantic Council staff, ASMFC staff. Dr. Pierce has had conversations with the Science Center, and it is our goal at this point, as we move forward with development of that model, to identify the gaps that need to be covered in the data that we're going to have in order to actually put this model into use for management as suggested by the peer review. So our conversation with Dr. Pierce, he has laid forward a path whereby the Commission would be aware of the efforts to develop this sex-based model. The Commission would reach out to the Science Center requesting more information about the data that would be needed to feed that, and that would potentially lead to the TC getting involved in order to help identify what data sources currently are there and what would need to be created either through private funding, RSA, now that we have NEOMAP available, or other means to make sure this sex-based model. So the request is, at this point, Dr. Pierce has suggested that a letter be sent to the Science Center asking about these gaps in data so that we could use a sex-based model, and then potentially getting the TC involved as well to help with that assessment. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Pierce for his comments. Thank you.
I don't know why, Adam. You covered that very well. That is the issue. It's really not an issue. It's something that I'm going to pursue with the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. This sex-specific model that could be developed for fluke actually came out of a recommendation from a past SARC of the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. They said it should be done, it should be looked at, and we have individuals out there, scientists and others, who are willing to pursue this. I asked Paul Rago if we did have these models, what data would be needed to go into the models in order for them to be used, and he said, well, all they have right now is bottom troll survey information. They would have to take that survey information, develop sex ratios, male and female, for the tows, and then apply that to the commercial database and recreational fishery database. And I said to him, that seems awfully inadequate. I doubt very much that anyone would want to use that approach for determining the stock status for male and female fluke. We need the data from the commercial fishery and the recreational fishery. So what I told Adam I would do, with no board objection, is just contact Paul Rago, Dr. Rago, and ask him to further elaborate what data would be needed to go into that sex-specific model if it's developed and accepted as a usable model. What data would be necessary? How would that data have to be gathered by port coverage, fishery coverage? In other words, give us the nuts and the bolts. What is needed? With that explanation in hand, then our technical committee would be in a far better position to address the models, and we would know as a board whether it's really necessary, useful for us to pursue that strategy. Because if we can't get the data, then there's no reason to have the models. There's no data to go into the models. Now, with the research set aside potentially being available for specific research, fishermen research, cooperative research with fishermen, which is now the likelihood. This issue becomes important because it may be possible for the fishing industry, recreational and commercial, to work with scientists, with academia, to propose that this information be collected. I say it's not possible because it appears the National Marine Fisheries Service is paying for NEMAP, which means that all of the research set aside that's been going into NEMAP, just about all of it, will now be available for this sort of research. It's therefore relevant for us to pursue this further with Paul Rego, with the Center, and to follow up on the request by Adam and other researchers. So without objection, that's what I will do, further pursue this with Paul Rego, keep you up to date as to our progress on this issue, and see where it brings us. Okay. Tony.
And just for another thing for the board to think about as we move into action planning for 2015, the summer flounder is currently not scheduled on either the SASARC's assessment, nor is it on the Commission's assessment. So if it's the board's prerogative to move forward with such a model, that we would need to get it onto the schedule, but also into the action planning, whether that be for next year or the year ahead, but just to make sure that the board does give staff direction on that as we go forward.
Thank you, Tony. We're 10 minutes over. Unless there's something really important that needs to be addressed right now, I would like to adjourn, but I see a hand up, so therefore it must be important.
It's just that one...
No, wrong guy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm encouraged to hear that you're exploring the possibility that you and Adam are putting forth here to explore the possibility of using the sex-based model in the summer flounder assessment. And I'd like to request, if I could, if you could include me in those discussions as they go forward. I was involved in the last benchmark assessment for summer flounder, where we explored the possibility of using the sex-based model. Also, we have 2 years worth of data for some states, sex-based for the commercial fishery and the recreational fishery. We have 1 year that includes the entire commercial and recreational fishery from Massachusetts to, I forgot if it was Virginia or North Carolina. I think we got some samples from North Carolina. And then there wasn't enough funding to do all of those states in year 2. So year 2 we have the commercial and recreational fisheries for New York and New Jersey. And that was through funding through PMAPS, the Partnership for Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Science. There's a final report on that available through the Cooperative Research Program. So there's a basis for that information. Some of the discussion at the last benchmark assessment was that that's the type of information we need to go forward with a sex-based model. We just need more of it. And then the question becomes, right, who's going to pay for it? We also, as part of that project, looked at utilizing the NIMS survey information, you know, the sexed information that they collect on the survey. We did an analysis to see how well that information correlated with the actual information we collected in the ports for both the commercial and recreational fisheries, and it does not correlate well.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your offer, and yes, indeed, we'll make sure that you're included with all these future discussions as to what can be done and what should be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, did you have something else?
Just quickly to say, states can go back that have surveys and talk with their survey people about what work we should anticipate doing to get sex-specific indices of abundance, age structure, and all that. So,
thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. It's seconded, I'm sure. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.